Hello, everybody. It is your pal Bill. It is Sunday. I don't know, what's today, 29th, I think. And I want to do this video today. I feel like I need to kind of clear the air and talk about some things. Um, it is not lost on me that, the last couple of videos that I made that were more of a rant style, were definitely, I'll admit, more aggressive than my earlier videos. And, in ways, I'm sorry to the people that offended. I didn't say anything in those videos that, really isn't true, but, maybe a little blunt. But, my intention, like anybody that's watched my videos from the beginning, and there's not really a lot of them, so if you want to go back and catch up and watch them in order so that you kind of understand this a little bit more, I would encourage you to do so, especially if you're somebody that knows me and maybe loves me or cares about me, because it's very important to understand where I come from when I am making these videos and why I decided to do this. And the rant style of the last couple of them are not the videos that I even want to be making, to be honest with you. And I mean that. I'd like to be calmer and more collected and, a little more fruitful with what I'm putting out there. But it's really, it's a double-edged sword because my intent is to get people to listen. And, the people that, aren't seeing things yet, I really want you to see them. We can be healthier collectively if everybody can see these things. And it is absolutely true that when you see them, you can't unsee them and you can't look at things the way that you looked at them before. And, it's difficult for me because, like, I don't want to alienate people and I don't want to make, enemies or have haters, or people angry at me. But it kind of comes with the territory, if you're going to be outspoken. And, a lot of people are just fine with being complacent, and I'm not that type of person. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm not that type of person. I question everything. My number one thing, is always with everything, why? And then I need to, think things through all the way down the line and understand them, to make sense of them and make my determinations on, right and wrong and good and bad. And that's what drives me and everything that I do and everything that I say. I'm a good person. I make a enormous effort to be a good person. It's real easy. It's so much easier to just get, sucked into, just basic petty grievances and then just kind of, live your life like that. And I don't live like that. There's complacency is not a thing for me. I would love to be able to be complacent, but the status quo needs to be healthier for me to feel okay with being complacent. And there was a time in my life where I felt complacent and it was okay. And I don't feel like it's okay right now. Right now, I want things to change so I can go back to being complacent and feel like things are on the right track, all around us with everything that, touches our individual lives and our families and, the people that we love and care about. And, just because there's a lot of people out there that are not directly connected to you that you love and care about does not mean in any way that those people are bad people or not living the same type of lives that you live or going through the same struggles that you go through. And, my objective is to align everybody on all sides to really come to the realization that we are all on the same plane. We all have the same struggles. We're all at the mercy of most things that, we need in our lives. And, maybe we haven't always been like that, as a species. We started out very simple and very primitive, and we evolved. And, I think that there came a point where, a population got big, and, people would constantly have conflicts, and they need to find a way to, control the masses, and install some sort of governance and um, civility, and that's where things started. And we as a species continue to evolve. And, a huge part of the evolution is technology, and where technology has brought us. And, as technology evolves, we, you know, I think naturally, as a species, being human beings, we prefer the path of least resistance. And when you have a path of least resistance, it's human nature to just fall into that path of least resistance, because you just don't want, nobody wants troubles, nobody wants to have conflicts, nobody wants unpleasantness, introduced into aspects of their life, and sometimes I think like the time that we're living in right now, because we're so heavily influenced and everything is so flashy and loud and in your face, and you're constantly having to process so much all the time. And it didn't used to be like that, going all the way back in the human timeline. And, even in my 46 years, there was a time in my life where the noise was not what it is now. It's like people are connected to the internet on their phones, and, just everything all the time. People's heads are in their phones, and I'm not even going to pretend like I'm not the same way, but I'm using it in a way that I want to gain knowledge, and I want to gain real knowledge. I don't want to just listen to, some horse shit that people are telling me, and I'm not about clickbait where I just read a headline. If I see something and it's got an interesting headline, I'm going to click on it, and then, I'm going to, one, consider the source. Have I ever heard of it before? If I have, are they a biased source? Can I take what they say with a grain of salt, or, do they have, real credibility that I can kind of use this into my knowledge and my wisdom, to collect from lots of places on any given subject, and then take all of these things and rationalize them in a way that, okay, it brings me back to my fundamentals of what's right and wrong in this situation, what's good and bad in this situation, because I want to always advocate for good. And sometimes there's really difficult, complicated situations, and I know that a lot of those are, the hot button issues that we all have to deal with all the time, that, get people riled up and upset. But, the thing is like, you can't let people exploit those things and interject false thoughts and try to turn those false thoughts into realities, because we can't live in a fake world. Like, and I think that, and I'm not saying this in any way to be unpatriotic or whatever, but, I have traveled outside of this country before for a short time, and it was only in one area, but it was very eye opening to see, you know, how other people live in other areas of the world. And, in other videos I talked about cultures and stuff like that. I went over to the UK, and I spent like about 7 hours one day on our lighter day, with my coworkers walking around London, and it was freaking amazing. Like the history in there, and the appreciation for the architecture and perfection, and really having that integrity and caring about it, because it is a part of their long history. It's a part of their culture, it's part of their heritage. And as you're walking through, if you got Big Ben and it's got like a big chunk of concrete missing, they're fixing it. They want it to remain pristine, because it's got a long history, and it means a lot, and it's played a part probably in a lot of different aspects of their history, as a country. And we think in our country, because of the way that we are conditioned, almost from birth, or as soon as maybe from birth, depending on, what the level of patriotism is that your parents had, or as soon as you get into school and you have to start saying the Pledge of Allegiance and the things that you're taught, you know, um, they don't want to teach the bad parts of history, and it's understandable because it's not flattering and it doesn't make anybody feel good, but that's how you learn. You learn from your mistakes and everything. And other countries have done that. But like, we have this like conditioning of nationalism and patriotism, and that's, you know in concept, it's great. We should all be very patriotic, and it's the same thing with like your sports teams. Why, in Buffalo, most of the people there are Buffalo Bills fans. They're huge Buffalo Bills fans. There's other people that like other teams, and that could be because their dad liked the Browns or something like that. So they grew up liking the Browns and they carried it on and they never bit onto the bandwagon. But there's nothing wrong with being, a part of your community and having pride and stuff. And I'm going to make another video soon, very soon, about pride, because I think that's something worth talking about, and the concept of it and how people implement it into their everyday lives and their worldviews and stuff. But you know we're taught in this country that other countries are garbage compared to us. We know everything. We're the best. And the truth is like we are approaching 250 years, like I said before, and that's not very long. It's not long, in comparison to the rest of the world, our established civilization here in the United States. And you know once you go out and you see that somewhere else, you kind of you look at things a little differently, and you see that the things that you've been taught, while not all are bad, and a lot of it is very well intentioned, um, you realize that you're lied to about things. And you know I don't know anybody that likes being lied to. I don't like being lied to, by people or by anything, so I'm very skeptical about the things that I'm told, and I need to find out whether what I'm being told is legitimate. And then I'm going to use, when I find the legitimacy, and like I've said before, like when I look at things from all sorts of different sources on the same topic, I'm looking for consistency in what they are all saying, because therein lies some element of truth, and then from there you have to continually dissect things. And there's a lot of people that, obviously, and I'm talking about people on the other side of my thoughts and my stance on things, that I can tell care, or they care to know, or they want to be informed and they want to know the truth. But the problem is where you're getting this information and where you're giving your loyalty to. And if they're disingenuous and they have you know ill intentions because it's for their own personal gain, it'd be wise to recognize that. And if you care, then you need to cut that out of your life and find the stuff where you are, the places where you're being told more elements of truth, you know? And the thing is, the truth is hard. It's hard to accept, and nobody wants to accept it because everybody wants everything to be good. Everybody wants everything to be, calm and to go their way. And that includes me. I don't exclude myself from any of that. But, I struggle just like everybody else. And it pains me when I got to know that people are upset or angry with me for being genuine and telling the truth, and people that I love and care about, that I've had many, many, interactions with, heartfelt, people that I've helped, people that have helped me, that I have relationships with, that I think know me and get me and my character and who I am, and that, I'm not a malicious person. I'm never coming from a bad place. I'm not scheming. I don't do shit like that, you know? And I would hope that these people, and if these people think that I'm smart or intelligent or whatever, which I've heard a lot of people have always told me, and it feels good and it's flattering, and it's like, I don't try to put myself up on a pedestal, but I try to share my knowledge and the things that I observe and perceive. And I would think that those people that, are getting upset with me about saying things would take into consideration that I am more like them than the people that are putting stuff in their heads. And that I would hope that they would think that if they had to put in two hands the people that are putting things in my head, or the person that's genuinely trying to talk to me about things and tell me things, I would hope that it would be me. But in the reality we live in, it's just not, and I make these videos and I want the people that I love and care about to hear them and see them. And, I'm reluctant putting these things out and putting myself on the line. It's very vulnerable to do. But, I care enough, and it's coming from a good place. I care enough that I just want people to start seeing the truth. And when they start to see one element of truth and they dissect it and they find out that they weren't being told the truth by the people that they, believe, I want them to think about it, dissect things and maybe take the time to learn about it. And then, you'll come to hopefully some of the things that, I've come to in my research on things. And then when you realize that you've been lied to about something, then don't just stop there. Think about the other things that you've been told, that you believe, that you feel very strongly on, that you've really been just getting it from one place and how they want you to think about it. And then you start to look into that. And then you start to think about, okay, well, if I've been lied to about this and I've been lied to about that, what else have I been lied to about? And it's forming strong opinions and passion inside of people. And I'm all about passion and strong opinions, but, they have to be rooted in truth and reality, to have credibility with me. There was another thing that I had wanted to talk about here is that, you've got, like, going back to the complacency, you've got people that just want to be led because they just don't either have it in them or just don't have the desire to want to be the person to lead. And then you have people that are leaders. And the people that are leaders will go against the grain. The people that are leaders will question authority. The people that are leaders, and you take this back to, like, even just, our military successes throughout our history and having great generals that led the war and stuff like that. You have to have people that are willing to lead, and you have to have people that are willing to look out for the better of everybody and not just yourself, because if everybody just cared about themselves, then it would just be unlivable. You have to have the people out there that care about everybody collectively and that will put themselves in the back seat, because for the greater good and for human beings continuing on and for healthier futures for ourselves with what time we got left, and for, my children and everybody's children and everybody's grandchildren, we need to steer them in the right path. And the right path can't be violence and destruction and hate. I'm not out here promoting hate. I'm out promoting good. I am, while being perceived at my rants that I'm spreading hate, I'm trying to put a spotlight on hate. Like, it needs a big spotlight on it, and it needs to, if people took the time to really, like, break that down and think about it, and if it's, really fair to be a certain way to a whole group of people, it's not fair. And, like, I know a lot of the people that are upset with me are kind of like on the right and on the MAGA side and stuff like that. And it's like, I'm not trying to demonize a whole group of people, but, unfortunately, these are the people that are, still being lied to. And there's a lot of people that are waking up, and you can't just, like, dismiss all of the people that, like, came out of the first administration that spoke up and said things ain't right here. They're not right. This is not okay. And, they're just squashed by the media because, like, they need things to keep going, like I said before. So they're discredited, and, they try and make these people look like fools or like they don't know what they're talking about. But there's so many of them. And even now, like in this second term, you got people that were beloved people on your news in your households every day that you believe them and you loved what they had to say and everything. And I don't agree with most of a lot of what these people say, but you look at your Tucker Carlsons and your Marjorie Taylor Greens, and a lot of people from that side have seen the light, and and these people are from the inside, like they're seeing things that you and I cannot see, and they're sounding the alarms. So when people on the inside start sounding the alarms, like you can't just dismiss them. Like, at the very least, ask why and look into it, you know. But again, I'm sorry to people that I offended. It's a difficult thing for me because I want to make those calm videos where I just take a topic and I break them down like I started to in the beginning, and I really want to do that. And not do these rant style type of videos that the last couple were. But like, I'm at my wit's end on shit, like this is just, it's so difficult. And like, people on the other side that don't like this think that it should just be okay for me to live with this stuff on the other side in my face all the time, all day, every day, from every angle. And it's just like, I see that there's so many holes in it. And I'm just supposed to shut up and be okay with that and not have an opinion and just be complacent. And it's like, if I felt like things were going to fall into place okay, then I could step back a little bit. But I don't see them falling into place, And the sad reality is that nobody's watching my videos that are calm and trying to break things down in a fruitful and respectful and uncondescending manner. It unfortunately is the ones that, strike a nerve with people, that get them to pay attention and listen. And whether they like what I have to say or not, at least I feel like people are listening a little bit. And I guess I'll chalk that up as to a silver lining in all of this, But I love my family. I love everyone in my family. I love all of my friends, and the people that I've built friendships and relationships with. I love all of you. I want to reach you, and I want to reach everybody. I want these videos. I'm not even sharing them on Facebook because I don't want to, I don't want to like throw fuel to the fire. So I'm just uploading these videos, and if people find them, they find them. And I'm going to try and start casting my reach out so that they're found on a bigger scale. And I just hope that anything that I say resonates, or at least gets people to think. And not everybody that you're perceiving on the other side is bad, and I would be really inclined to tell you that the great vast majority of them are, in the right place, trying to be on the right side of history and trying to look out for the greater good of everybody. Um, Seeing people dissenting on the protests. Why aren't these people at work? It's a Saturday. You think people really want to spend their Saturday out there in the freezing cold, protesting things? It's just, people are like, why are people doing that? I don't understand, no kings. This is the last thing I'm going to say before I end this video. The no kings thing. Nobody that's out there protesting is saying that Trump is a king, or that we think he's a king, or that we live in a monarchy, or anything. It is that his governance style right now is that of a king. He has stacked the government so that he can do whatever he wants. He can send our soldiers into war without any of the checks and balances. And isn't that what kings did? If they had a gripe with somebody, they just sent out their soldiers to go fight a war for them and die, and they're just numbers, and they don't really care. They're servants, And having that type of governance, I think that we as a country would like to not have our soldiers regarded that way. They're not just pawns. We're not just putting them in. We should be, if we have to fight a war, we should really have to fight a war. And we should not be looking for wars. We should not be looking for invasions. We should not be looking to steal other land. Like, we're past all that in this world. Like, and we've spent a lot of time trying to stop other countries from doing the same stuff. And it's dragged us into these wars that we don't want to be in. But nobody thinks this is not about king as in, we think we're in a monarchy. It's not about that. It's just that this government, that we take pride in governing us, has checks and balances that were set up, and there's a big pride in that we set it up that way. You know, the founding fathers set it up that way so that we have people to stop other people and have, you know, healthy debate on before we move forward on major things. You know, it's not about kings. All these people are out there because they're looking out for the betterment of everybody, and they want a better future and a better society that we're living in. Less hate, less conflict. But, you know, just looking down on people for exercising their First Amendment rights is it's not cool. And, you know, if a lot of these people haven't done it in history, then a lot of the things that we take for granted that we enjoy in our lives that benefit us wouldn't exist. But I hope that this was a better video to listen to. Again, trying to come from a good place. I would rather make calm videos like this than the ones that are rants. But I would like people to watch these videos because they're not watching these ones. They're only watching the rants because they're mad about them, I think. I hope you have a great Sunday.